Parliament, of course, returns tomorrow after a 2.5-week recess in what promises to be a huge week for the Prime Minister. Of course, the Prime Minister facing MPs for that first time since his Partygate fine. Let's discuss this now in deeper depth with the Guido Fawkes reporter, Adam Cherry. Welcome to the programme, Adam. We heard there from Tom Hunt that he expects the Prime Minister to only address the fine which he has been given. Of course, a wide array of speculation that the Prime Minister will have more fines coming down the track, given that the fine he has received was for a relatively minor breach of the rules in anyone's book. Many people surprised that the Chancellor was fined at all, given the nature of that particular event. Is it in the Prime Minister's interests to speak more widely to Partygate as a whole, or to focus on that one specific fine he's been given?
Well, I think his strategy so far is revealing. It's to focus entirely on that one incident which he has been fined for. Now, obviously, the briefings in the newspaper suggest that's not the only difficulty he's going to have with this. So, if I were him, I would open it out and expect that you're going to face broader consequences for this. Otherwise, you're going to look like an idiot, keep coming back again and again and say sorry, oh sorry again and sorry again. His MPs have already made up their minds, I think. He's not going to be ousted for this, barring some huge controversy. So you might as well show some contrition, draw attention to the success. And again, this is all what we're expecting to hear anyway. And it's what Tom just mentioned as well. We're expecting him to say, I apologise for what's happened. It was an inappropriate culture, but I've got a lot on my plate at the moment. The country has a lot to worry about. There's the Ukraine crisis. Now's not the time to indulge all this sort of stuff. So I don't think he necessarily pays a bigger price for acknowledging greater cultural and institutional problems within Downing Street. We already know that's happened. At least, there's an expectation that that's already happened.
Of course, the Prime Minister and the Conservative Party took such a big dent in the polls for this in January and February. We haven't yet reached that level of ire. That sort of high watermark has not been returned to. Is there, to some extent, an expectation that this is all priced in the minds of the electorate? Whether or not the Prime Minister, however many fines he actually receives, people pretty much made their minds up a couple of months ago whether he broke the rules or not.
Well, we'll see. The biggest indicator of that will obviously be the local elections in about 3 weeks' time. Polling on that suggests that the Conservatives are going to take a bit of a beating. Again, polls go up and down, and they might outperform those measly expectations. We'll see. Obviously, the opposition want to make a meal of this because it's an easy hit. I should have mentioned this earlier. In fact, they want to have a censorship vote against Boris. Now, obviously, they don't expect to win that, but it does give them some ammunition on the campaign stop to say, look, your MP supported this Prime Minister. He broke the law. What do you think of that? So it's an effective tool for them.
And of course, those local elections on the 5th of May will weigh heavy on the minds of MPs, speaking to their local associations, speaking to their councillors as well. Are you expecting a pretty large drubbing for the Conservative Party then?
Yeah, I think I would be surprised if the recent polling doesn't bear out to a certain extent. I think the most recent figures was losing something like 800 local seats. That's quite significant. But anything close to that is pretty poor for them. They've been in government for 12 years. Obviously, these are local elections, not national, but those national feelings would inevitably feed through to the locals anyway. So, Starmer's rebuilt the party, the Labour Party. They're having a pretty rough time. There's a cost of living crisis. There's a lot of negativity around the party at the moment, and it wouldn't surprise me if they suffer as a result of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Suddenly we seem to be talking about the Conservative Party as if it's been in power for 12 years, which in one form or another, I suppose it has. Up until this year, most people were saying this felt like a fresh government. It felt like a new government. It felt like there hadn't been one continuous party in power since 2010, but in many ways, 3 different parties led by 3 different prime ministers since that point, or arguably 4 if we count the coalition as a separate entity in and of itself. And yet now, with the global context, with inflation relatively high in this country, of course higher in America and in the Eurozone, but lower in certain countries like France, which has had a more sensible energy policy for the last few decades. I wonder, this is all catching up with the Conservative Party. Looking ahead not just to the local elections, but potentially to the next general election, are we looking at Prime Minister Keir Starmer?
Yeah, we might be. I mean, it's probably about 2 years away. They need to wait for the boundary changes, and there's still a crisis in Ukraine. So I wouldn't expect an election in the next 12 months. Let's say 2 years. By that point, you're looking at 14 years in government. As you say, yeah, the government has evolved. It feels like 3 different administrations, but it's still the same, blue team at the top. So it wouldn't be a shock in the way that maybe it might have seen even 6 or 12 months ago. Starmer's had a decent run of it in the last 6 months. It hasn't helped, it hasn't hurt that a lot of unforced errors from the government have given him some easy wins. It'll be interesting to see how he handles PMQs on Wednesday. Obviously, this is the first time he's been face to face with Boris since all these latest developments in Partygate. So there should be open goals there. And if he can capitalise on that, then he can build some more momentum. But again, as I say, 2 years is a long time in politics. So I want to give a boring answer and hedge my bets a bit. But I don't think it's completely unreasonable at this point.
Yeah, if the last 2 weeks have anything to be gone by, then the next 2 years will be absolutely fascinating. We'll keep a close eye on PMQs on Wednesday. But for now, Adam Cherry from the Guido Fawkes website, thanks so much for joining us here on The Briefing this afternoon.